The brain drain you won't see until it's too late. The bridge alarm sounded once, then died. A junior inspector stared at hairline cracks she couldn't name, called it in, and got silence. 12 hours later, a detour sign went up. No explanation, no press conference, just cones and a memo. The veteran who used to catch these things had retired last spring. His replacement hadn't been hired. Here's the part nobody's tracking. What's leaking out isn't just people, it's competence. Judgment. The apprenticeship you call Google. We're walking into the next crisis with hollowed-out institutions wearing full uniforms. 3 things drive it: an exodus, a vacuum, and the catastrophe that follows. One decision years ago lit the fuse. Roadmap and stakes clarified. We'll follow a 3-part arc: exodus, vacuum, catastrophe, and move straight to why it matters. Why now? Burnout from the last global shock never healed. Science got pulled into identity wars. Media incentives moved from truth to engagement. Government layered targets until the only thing that mattered was the spreadsheet. Add harassment, legal risk, and a pay gap you can see from space, and it became rational to leave, not quitting, choosing self-preservation. What's the human cost? Safety becomes theater. Medicine becomes messaging. Infrastructure becomes a press release with a ribbon cutting. Truth becomes a vibe you subscribe to. This isn't abstract. It's the oncology nurse who won't work nights after doxing. It's the city engineer who knows which culvert floods first and isn't there when the forecast clips wrong by 6 hours. Here's how we'll prove it. We'll track data where it exists, but we'll stay with people. A virologist who locked her office door and cried before handing in a badge. A Metro editor who kept one story off the homepage and got sidelined. A bridge inspector who stopped getting time to walk spans and started clicking boxes. We'll show the replacements, the incentives, and the near miss that should have been caught. Keep one question in mind as we move. When the alarms sound next, who's actually making the call, and what have they learned the hard way? The expert exodus begins. Start with the rooms that got quiet first. County health offices where the fluorescent lights never turn off, where the walls are lined with outbreak maps and the coffee is always old. A medical officer who used to know every school nurse by name is suddenly doing press hits instead of field visits. She writes a resignation letter that thanks everyone and says nothing. Her badge still opens the lab door on her last day. She closes it gently, like that matters. Wave 1 was public health. Epidemiologists who could read a line list like a short story, contact tracers who could coax a reluctant phone call into a life-saving isolation, local medical officers who remembered the norovirus year when the winter formal had to be moved. They stayed through the first surge, the second, the third. Then came the meetings that contradicted their own field notes, the guidance they didn't believe but had to say out loud, the threats that slid from inboxes into home addresses. Some took leave, some never came back. Now watch the newsroom floor. It's 9:40 p.m., the Metro editor is on the phone with a lawyer, and a line producer taps her watch because the homepage slot is empty. The editor kills a weekly sourced scandal piece that would drive traffic but hurt a kid who didn't deserve it. 2 weeks later, his name disappears from the masthead and reappears as consultant. He didn't get fired. He got tired. The beat reporter he mentored starts filing threads on a platform that pays by the rage. That was Wave 2, investigative reporters and their editors. They carried the institutional memory that lets you smell when a document dump is missing one page. They knew which FOIA to file on a Friday afternoon to catch a nervous clerk. They could tell by the way a spokesperson took a breath whether a claim would hold by morning. When the business model shifted from subscription trust to algorithmic engagement, they took their notebooks and left. A few launched newsletters. Most learned to keep their heads down at organizations that had moved the goalposts to virality. Then the civil service, the regulator who's been in the same cubicle for 14 years, the one with a file cabinet that sticks and a map with a thumbtack for every bridge older than his dad. He used to visit sites in steel-toe boots and ask the question that wasn't on the checklist. Mid-career, not close enough to retirement to coast, not cynical enough to accept KPI theater. The job changes around him. More dashboards, fewer site visits, higher caseloads, less discretion. He gets a performance plan that says throughput. He knows what that means. He walks. Microstories tell the pattern better than a bar chart. A virologist spends a Sunday morning rewriting a memo so it carries the truth without triggering the headline she knows is coming. She locks her office door, cries until her eyes swell, and slides her access card across a table on Monday. A Metro editor who grew up stapling crime blotters at a Suburban weekly tries to slow a story that's missing context and gets sidelined to features. He still writes beautifully about farmers' markets. He no longer gets invited to budget meetings. A bridge inspector with a limp from an old fall stops crawling beams because there's no time. He starts clicking boxes on a tablet. He sleeps badly. Here's why this matters. Institutions don't just store knowledge in servers and binders. They store it in people who remember. The nurse who tells you an ICU ventilator's sound is off. The lab tech who notices a reagent batch smells sweeter than usual. The engineer who recognizes the harmonic in a riveted span hears it and says, "We're not going over today." When they leave, the documents stay. The judgment goes. And it didn't leave in a headline. It left under NDAs that bought silence for 2 months of severance. It left in LinkedIn posts that said "new chapter" and meant, "I couldn't do this anymore." It left wrapped in a fear that if you said out loud why you were stepping away, you'd be branded bitter or political or both. The pattern buried itself in nice emails and quiet farewells. You can feel the vacuum before you can measure it. Meetings take longer because nobody knows which precedent fits. Memos get safer because nobody trusts the receiver. New hires arrive smart, earnest, and untaught. They've got credentials and tutorials. They don't have the scar tissue. They think the dashboard is the terrain. They don't know where the first landslide always starts. Meanwhile, the people who stay carry more weight. They're the ones on call every weekend because they're the last who can. They cover 2 jobs and a 3rd inbox marked urgent. They train a rotating door of contractors who leave just as they're useful. They stop raising their hands in meetings because the last time they did, the slide deck moved on without them. They start rehearsing their own exit lines on the drive home. If you're looking for declaration letters, you won't find them. You'll find a city's outbreak surveillance lead listed as acting for 8 months. You'll find a regional grid control room with 2 operators on overtime again. You'll find a newsroom without a copy desk at midnight. You'll find regulators who used to mentor apprentices now answering procurement questions. You'll find empty chairs at the monthly safety review, cameras turned off, packets sent, no discussion. So ask it plainly, if they're leaving, who's replacing them? The next section has the answer. It's not comforting. The vacuum effect, who steps in and why it's worse. While those chairs sit empty, something else is happening across town. The seats get filled, just not by who you think. A deputy's nephew with a campaign badge, a loyal comms aide who knows the talking points, a contractor who's brilliant at deliverables, less keen on accountability. When the lights stutter at 2 a.m., the work doesn't stop. The discretion does. Start with the loyalty hire. He's smart, quick, and grateful. He owes the appointment to a handshake, not a track record. In the first meeting, he learns the script. Avoid blame, shape headlines, keep the numbers clean. He's told that decisions flow through the principal, not through field notes. He learns which calls go straight to the political office and which die on the voicemail tree. His calendar fills with optics. He starts measuring success by applause lines. Then the consultants. Their badge prints at 8:12 a.m. and a discovery workshop starts at 9. They map processes with rainbow sticky notes and promise a dashboard by Friday. It looks beautiful. It tracks inputs, not outcomes. There's a burned-down chart that rewards speed over sense. The site visits get replaced with surveys. The hard questions, do we have enough operators who can sign off at 3 a.m., become out of scope. The contract renews. Now add the software. The procurement deck said decision support at scale. In practice, it's a screen that turns red when the threshold is crossed. It doesn't ask why the threshold exists. It can't hear the wrong kind of hum in a transformer room or smell chloramine when a water mix drifts. It can't see the worry in a resident's face and ask a follow-up that unlocks the truth. It's quick, it's clean, it's wrong just often enough to matter. Funding strings pull tighter. Research dollars arrive with a smile and a clause. Align communications with agency objectives. Coordinate messaging through approved channels. Curiosity becomes compliance. The principal investigator who wants to chase an anomaly learns to schedule her curiosity between grant deliverables. The question that might embarrass a sponsor waits for next year, then disappears. Nobody writes that down. Everybody knows. Meanwhile, training changes shape. Apprenticeship takes time, and time is the only thing you can't expense on a grant. So the junior analyst gets the crash course, 6 SOPs, 3 e-learning modules, and a buddy who left last month. Then the phone rings with a real event. She has the dashboard. She doesn't have the judgment. She hears the tone in a county caller's voice and looks for a menu option that doesn't exist. Nobody trained her for silence. Here's a micro story. A logistics unit loses a senior planner to retirement and backfills with a project manager from a private vendor. He's great at Gantt charts, less sure about perishable cold chain under flood conditions. The first storm spins the river out of its banks. He meets the warehouse foreman at dawn and insists the pallets meet spec. The foreman says, "This road will be gone by noon. We load the smaller trucks now." The manager checks the SLA. By the time the trucks roll, the road is gone. Another, a junior communications officer, is handed the daily briefing during an outbreak. She's told to keep confidence high and avoid noise. She decides to smooth a confusing detail, testing backlog versus new positives, and inadvertently tells the public the wrong trend. The next day's correction lands next to an influencer calling it a cover-up. Compliance drops. The officer deletes her apps. She stops sleeping through the night. This wasn't random drift. Policies nudged it. Cost controls turned headcount into a line item to minimize and contractors into an expense you can justify. Hiring freezes made vacancies normal. Centralized approvals slowed decisions until frontlines learned to act first and apologize later, or just wait and pray. Performance reviews weighted by metrics made discretion risky. A supervisor can defend numbers. She can't defend a gut call that saved a life but broke protocol. So gut calls disappear. Watch how incentives stack. A department learns that fewer reported incidents equal success. Reports go down, the incidents don't. A regulator is rewarded for time to close investigations, files close quickly, oversight weakens, a lab is told to increase throughput. Repeats get cut. The rare anomalies vanish in the noise. Everyone hits their targets. Nobody hits the truth. And AI, it's a tool, not a villain. But in hollow systems, it becomes a crutch. Leadership loves that it's objective. It inherits the biases of the data it trains on, the very gaps created by underreporting and KPI gaming. It learns that nothing bad ever happens on weekends because the skeleton crew stopped filing. It learns that outbreaks don't start in certain zip codes because those clinics closed. It reproduces absence. It feels scientific. It's not judgment. Meanwhile, field culture frays. The old hands who remain stop teaching because teaching without protection creates blame magnets. The juniors ask fewer questions because curiosity reads like incompetence in rooms where certainty is performative. Meetings migrate from whiteboards to decks. The last paragraph, "Here's what keeps me up at night," gets cut for time. Who benefits? In the short term, everyone with a quarterly report. Politicians get smoother news cycles. Vendors get renewals. Managers get green dashboards. Careers move. The system weakens, and when pressure hits, the empty core shows. This wasn't a single villain or a secret plan. It was 1,000 reasonable decisions that made the unreasonable inevitable. The vacuum didn't just invite worse, it rewarded it. And the bill shows up during the kind of failure a checklist can't catch. The incentive trap, how the system made leaving rational. Here's where the quiet math kicks in. The people who left didn't flinch first, they ran the numbers. What the system asked of them, what it rewarded, and what it punished lined up so cleanly that the only irrational move was staying. Start with science. Publish or perish was always a grind, then it became a game. You got promoted for counts, not corrections. A negative result you wrestled with for a year wouldn't move your H-index. A flashy preprint might. Grants began to read like marketing decks. Aligned to priorities, promised deliverables, hit milestones. The perverse loop closed. Papers bred papers, not knowledge. Senior scientists learned to advise trainees on citation strategies before study design. The lab meetings got shorter on what's true and longer on what hits. When the incentives pick spin over signal, the scrupulous walk. And the risk rose. A researcher who flagged concerns about a sponsor's favored outcome found her budget rebid. Another spent months fighting a retraction no one wanted to hear about. The message carried without anyone saying it. Integrity is your hobby, the metric is your job. Add harassment that comes with being visible online, and suddenly every correction moves with a personal cost. The choice narrowed, compromise quietly or step out. Media had its own version. Audience capture wasn't a theory, it was a dashboard. Editors watched the traffic heat map and felt the floor tilt. Stories that required patience lost to posts that provoked. Colleagues got doxxed for headline verbs. A newsroom memo praised engagement wins and shaved resources from public records work. A reporter learned the lesson. One careful investigation buys fewer career points than 3 viral explainers. If your paycheck depends on clicks, your spine starts to curve toward them. The ones who couldn't stomach that curve left. Civil service perfected KPI theater. Compliance targets reproduced themselves like mold. Inspect X facilities per quarter. Close Y cases in Z days. Reduce reported incidents by N%. The trick wasn't to improve reality, it was to redefine it. You can reduce incidents by discouraging reports. You can hit time to close by closing early. You can pass audits by memorizing the script. The veteran who used to push for root cause got a review that flagged inconsistency with standard workflows. Translation: stop thinking. If you're the kind who can't stop, you become the problem. The door starts to look like an exit. Legal risk accelerated the calculus. One wrong line in a briefing could spiral into litigation, hearings, and a career on pause. Say the uncomfortable truth and you might violate comms policy. Don't say it, and you live with the moral injury when the harm you predicted arrives. Meanwhile, harassment wasn't abstract. It arrived in inboxes and on porches. Doxing moved arguments from meeting rooms to living rooms. Spouses and kids became part of your risk assessment. That's when a calling turns into a liability you can't justify to your family. Then there's money. The pay gap to the private sector wasn't subtle. It was the first slide in every headhunter pitch. Benefits used to close it: pension, stability, pride. Pensions got trimmed. Stability turned into churn. Pride soured into cynicism. A mid-career regulator looked at a contractor clearing twice his salary to ask him how his job works. He did the arithmetic. Rationality pointed out the door. Add centralization. Decisions climbed upward until the people closest to the problem became note-takers. If your judgment won't be used, your judgment atrophies. And because approvals took time, caution became a virtue. But caution without discretion is paralysis. People who like solving problems don't thrive in paralysis. They start to wither, then they leave. Training, too, shifted from apprenticeship to content. A senior operator who used to train 4 juniors over a year now onboards 12 in a week. He knows what gets lost. He hears it in how they describe alarms, by color, not by meaning. He flags it. Management asks him to record a video module. He does. The misses multiply anyway. He goes home agitated and looks at a posting from a vendor that values his experience and won't ask him to fake throughput. He takes it. Listen to a small moment. A county health lead drafts guidance with caveats: what we know, what we don't. Comms cuts the uncertainty because confidence matters. She signs a version that makes her stomach twist. The backlash lands. She fields threats while the senior comms person gets praised for message discipline. That night, she writes a letter to herself: I won't do this again. 2 months later, she resigns to focus on family. She's telling the truth. Her family asked her to stop getting death threats. Or this: a bridge unit sets a target: reduce out-of-service time by 20%. Engineers learn to defer marginal calls. A suspect bearing gets monitored. The inspector who argues for shutdown gets told to be solutions-oriented. He hears the subtext: stop blocking metrics. He updates his resume. The trap's elegance was brutal. It made leaving rational and staying costly. It framed prudence as obstruction, curiosity as inefficiency, dissent as disloyalty, apprenticeship as waste. It put the biggest penalties on the exact instincts that keep complex systems safe. You don't need a conspiracy when incentives do this much work. The result shows up where failure is unforgiving. Not in quarterly slides, but in the minute when the system needs a human who knows the edge cases and has the standing to act. That person used to sit in the third chair from the window. That chair is on contract now, and the contract doesn't cover judgment. Fragile systems, where competence still matters. Here, where the margin still lives in people. Public health surveillance isn't just a database. It's a nurse who notices a cluster that feels wrong and an epidemiologist who knows which lab to call before lunch. When those people thin out, alerts slip. A clinic flags 3 unusual pneumonias. The dashboard waits for thresholds, but thresholds were tuned to last year's testing pattern, not this week's staffing gap. A senior disease detective would have called the ICU charge nurse and the wastewater lab. Instead, the alert chimes on Monday, and the weekend window is gone. Meanwhile, the data looks fine until it doesn't. Late lab entry smear time series, turning sharp signals into mush. A junior analyst trained to watch colors, not curves, concludes stability. The veteran would have checked lag-adjusted incidents and asked why one hospital's submissions went silent for 36 hours. That silence is a symptom. It gets missed. Aging infrastructure is the same story with steel. Inspections drift into checklists because checklists are defendable, but riveted spans talk in ways you can't code. A seasoned inspector hears a resonance at midspan and knows the dampers are lying. He stays, listens, and orders a closer look. Take him out, and the tablet check passes. A month later, thermal expansion opens a seam. Nobody saw it because nobody looked sideways at the green reading that didn't square with the morning temperature. Grid control rooms run on judgment under stress. Operators watch flows like air traffic, fast, dynamic, unforgiving. On blue sky days, the automations hum. During heat domes, when a plant trips and a wildfire eats a line, the screens go red across 3 states. The old hands know which neighbor will answer a call and which promise won't hold. They've lived the politics of shared reserves. They also know when to shed load early to save the system. Without them, the team waits for approvals while frequency sags. Black starts take days, and hospitals ride generators that weren't meant for it. Aviation hides its competence in maintenance logs and calloused hands. Experienced A&PS can feel a bearing with their fingertips and tell you it's a month from trouble. They log it, argue for the swap, and take the heat for schedule hits. Lose them and you get perfect paperwork on aging fleets with deferred items stacked under legal thresholds. A junior tech follows manual torque settings to the decimal but doesn't notice a thread that walks under load. The plane flies. The margin shrinks. Nuclear oversight is the part nobody wants to get wrong once. The veterans remember which alarms cascade into noise during steam generator testing, and which odd pairing of minor faults precedes a real one. They're the ones who'll pause a refueling outage to chase a faint vibration in a feedwater pump. That pause saves months. Without them, reviews are brisk, checkboxes are neat, and the plant restarts on schedule. Until the follow-up report after a near miss wonders why nobody pushed a little harder on an outlier. Across all of this, apprenticeship is the multiplier, not the course the hours shoulder to shoulder when someone says, "Listen to that," and you don't hear it until you do. The wastewater tech who teaches a rookie the smell of a sampling error. The bridge lead who explains why a clean photo doesn't mean a sound joint. The grid operator who drills a trainee on N-1 contingencies until they can run them half asleep. You can't accelerate those reps with a webinar. What happens when you thin that layer? Detection slides from early to on time, and on time is late in exponential systems. Diagnostics get less curious. Interventions get more conservative because nobody wants to own a bold call anymore. Performance looks fine until stress. Then the brittle spots show. Micro-stories keep it real. A county epidemiologist sees a spike in ER visits for GI complaints, but ICD codes are messy. She calls 3 ER charge nurses and learns a food distributor switched suppliers. She gets a traceback started before the lab confirms. Swap her for an algorithmic monitor, and you wait 2 days for the case definition to trip. A substation tech starts a night shift smelling ozone where it shouldn't be. He opens a panel, hears a faint sizzle, and radios for a controlled shutdown. The morning report calls it preventive maintenance. The outage that didn't happen never makes news. An airline crew chief notices an unusual rate of MELs on the same tail number. The items are unrelated on paper. He pulls the plane from service and pushes engineering to look for a wiring harness chafe. They find it. The Friday rush hates him. Monday loves him. Here's the quiet truth. Competence is cheap compared to failure, but it feels expensive in budgets and schedules. It takes headcount, time to train, leeway to say no, and cover to be the bad guy in the moment. Those are hard sells in performance cultures. You don't need a catastrophe to know this matters. You need a near miss, and one is coming. Not the spectacle you expect, but the small chain that almost breaks clean through. When it does, you'll see the outline of the person who should have been there. Case Study A, the almost disaster nobody saw. It started with a calendar change. A maintenance window for a river crossing bridge got nudged from Thursday night to Sunday dawn because the city wanted fewer traffic complaints. Nobody argued. The senior engineer who would have rolled his eyes and kept the slot had retired. His name still lived on a laminated flowchart taped to a file cabinet. Nobody looked at it. Stakes first. If the bearing assembly on Pier 4 failed, one lane would drop inches in seconds. Not a cinematic collapse, something subtler and nastier. A jolt at 55 miles an hour, a chain of swerves, steel flexing just enough to turn a weekday commute into a multi-car pileup with 2 semis in the mix. Ambulances would fight to reach the scene because the bridge is also the fastest way to the trauma center. The difference between near miss and mass casualty was a decision in the dark. Action started 2 weeks earlier with a subtle noise that didn't fit the weather. A junior inspector captured a clean checklist and a blurry audio note on her phone, a faint rhythmic scrape under load. The checklist didn't ask about scrapes. The tablet wanted torque values and surface temps. She typed monitor. The dashboard stayed green. Sunday dawn, unit on site. The crew chief checked his scope. A tidy plan, elevate, inspect, torque, log, clear. He'd done it a dozen times with the veteran who liked to take an extra beat at Pier 4. That beat wasn't in the SOP. It was in muscle memory. The new plan shaved minutes to hit a throughput target set by headquarters. Aim for 20% faster. the email said. He aimed. They raised the span. The wind pushed from the west harder than forecast. An older tech muttered about gust factor and got told the model accounted for it. The junior crouched by the bearing housing and felt a tremor in the glove she couldn't name. She asked for a pause. The crew chief glanced at the time, then at the KPI on his mind. He said, "Let's finish the checks." Meanwhile, downtown, the operations dashboard showed maintenance ongoing in a cool blue band. Comms had a pre-written note ready if anyone asked why the lanes were closed. Nobody asked. A consultant monitoring the timeline pinged the crew chief. "On track," he replied with a thumbs up. The consultant dropped the icon into the 8 a.m. status deck. Then a small thing, the hydraulic jack's pressure drifted 5% off nominal for 3 seconds. The junior flagged it. The older tech said that's the west wind biting. The manual's tolerance range covered it. They finished the torque check. The scrape sound quieted because the load was off. The crew took that as a good sign. They started lowering. This was the moment everything mattered. Under partial load, the bearing cage had a hairline crack that widened just enough to let a roller slip. Under full load, it would have seated awkwardly, then snapped back with a bang and a stress spike. A veteran would have known that Pier 4's cage had a rumored metallurgy issue from a batch delivered 8 years ago, back when the supplier was on probation. The note lived in a retired engineer's head and an email archive nobody searched. The junior hesitated, then broke protocol. She called the hotline meant for emergencies and asked for the duty engineer by name. The voicemail said the role was vacant with coverage by team. She hung up and called the warehouse foreman who'd been around forever. He didn't have authority. He had memory. He said if it's Pier 4 and the wind's west, recheck the cage under partial load, not full. It's fussy, but do it. They paused the lowering, reapplied partial load. The scrape returned, louder. The crew chief felt the air go tight. He ordered a stop and called the city. He didn't ask permission. He closed the span for 3 extra hours and ate the complaints. They pulled the housing and found the crack, hairline but real, shadowing a roller that had started to gall. Another Sunday's delay and a Monday under commuter load might have finished what time began. Impact, quiet fix. Emergency procurement authorized a replacement housing. A terse memo recorded anomalous wear detected, preemptive replacement. No press conference. The lanes reopened in the afternoon. The public saw cones, then no cones. Nobody learned what almost happened. There's no headline for "Bridge did not fail today." But inside, the reveal stung. The seat should have been filled by a veteran duty engineer whose job was to hold the pause button under pressure. Budget had split the role across 3 mid-levels, each with pieces of authority and none withstanding to overrule a metric. The policy decision that nudged that seat into a committee wasn't malicious. It was efficient. It saved a salary. It cost a sense. Ripple effects came dressed as optics. The follow-up policy memo emphasized communications alignment during maintenance events and consistency of public message. It added a new requirement: clear any changes to scheduled windows with the mayor's office to avoid confusion. It didn't add a requirement to cross-reference supplier batch histories with on-site checks or to restore a single accountable role with authority to halt work in ambiguous conditions. In the aftermath, the crew chief got a "thank you for diligence" note, and the junior got a quiet nod from the older tech. No one wrote down the foreman's advice. No one formalized the partial load recheck. The near miss became a story you tell over coffee until the people who know it leave. Meanwhile, on a different bridge, a different team hit their target time and moved on. The dashboard stayed green. The system learned the wrong lesson. The process works. It did this time because one person asked a question and another person answered off the books. That's the shape of the whole. The catastrophe didn't arrive because a thread of competence held, but threads fray. And while the city polished a slide about on-time maintenance, trust inside the system took a hit. The people who knew how close it came understood exactly what was missing: a seat, a nameplate, and the authority to say stop. Information collapse when no one believes anyone. While the bridge crew tightened bolts, something else loosened in public view: belief. Not the kind you write into mission statements, the kind that makes a stranger follow instructions in a crisis without knowing who wrote them. It eroded slowly, then all at once. Conflicting authorities spoke with the same tone and opposite facts. People chose the voice that sounded like their tribe and tuned out the rest. Start with a familiar scene. A state health department posts a late-night update. No cause for alarm, isolated cluster contained. The next morning, a hospitalist thread says admissions doubled, short on staff, testing behind. A mayor goes live with abundance of caution, closing 2 schools. A governor holds a comma presser, keep routines, no closures. Which one do you obey? By noon, an influencer with 1 million followers stitches the clips and calls it a cover story. The hashtag trends. Compliance falters. This wasn't just bad comms, it was structural. Centralized messaging pulled nuance out of language until truth sounded like spin. Local leaders with better information got muzzled, then blamed. Scientists learned that "we don't know yet" dies in the feed next to "here's what they're hiding." Corrections arrived days late and were received as proof of deceit, not proof of learning. Once trust fractures, a revised line sounds like retreat. Micro story: an emergency alert buzzes phones with a boil water notice after a treatment plant hiccup. Clear language, simple instruction. 10 minutes later, a wellness influencer tells followers she has inside info that chlorine levels are the real threat and to skip the boil. Her video goes viral. A grocery sells out of bottled water by noon while restaurants, unsure who to believe, shut down and dump inventory. The utility posts lab data. It gets 1/10 of the views. By evening, the alert lifts. The rumor lives for weeks. Meanwhile, platforms optimized for velocity outran the slow, careful cadence of evidence. An algorithm rewards novelty and certainty. Expertise trades in context and caveats. So the loudest claim becomes first contact with the public's attention. Corrections get labeled backtracking. The crowd that liked the first version doesn't click the fix. The cost of being wrong online is embarrassment. The cost of being speculative offline is fear. Guess which one wins? Inside institutions, the response made it worse. Leaders prioritized message discipline over transparency. Legal vetted every sentence. Field notes lost their edges. When outsiders filled the gaps, officials called them misinformation before offering something better. People noticed the condescension and stayed with the voices that made them feel respected, even when those voices were wrong. Another micro story: a wildfire races a ridge. County emergency management drafts evacuation zones. The map is messy because the wind is weird. They publish uncertainty bands. A popular prepper account redraws the lines as a clean wedge and says, "Trust me, I've got friends in the incident command." Residents in the wrong wedge flee early, clogging roads that need to clear for people actually in danger. A public information officer tries a threaded explainer about ember cast and terrain funnels. It reads like homework. The simple map travels, the nuanced one dies. Here's the feedback loop. Distrust pushes experts out. With fewer experts, errors increase. Errors fuel more distrust, which drives more departures. The people who stay learn to keep their heads down and their sentences safe. Safety sounds like nothing. Nothing gets ignored. Ignored guidance fails, and failure becomes proof that institutions can't be trusted. Round and round, capacity burns. What nobody planned for: identities absorbed expertise like dye in water. A mask wasn't cloth, it was a flag. A power outage wasn't weather, it was sabotage. A booster wasn't a dose, it was loyalty. Once technical choices map to identity, you can't fix bad information with better information. You have to rebuild belonging around truth. That takes time, trust, and voices anchored in communities before the crisis begins. There are counterexamples. Some places built muscle memory for trust. Consistent spokespeople, competition of ideas held in public, corrections framed as progress, not failure. They earned compliance because they practiced it when nothing was on fire. They didn't outsource risk communication to lawyers. They didn't let political staff sit between the data and the mic. And when they said, "We're not sure yet," people believed they'd return with something real. But most places didn't have that runway. They had dashboards, and dashboards don't talk back. They had media hits, and hits don't build relationships. They had 1,000 followers and no elders in the room. Elders matter. The nurse who's lived 3 outbreaks tells a neighborhood Facebook group what she'd tell her own mother, and people listen. The grid operator who coaches high school baseball can explain rolling blackouts without turning it into warfare. Those bridges are disappearing. Now widen the lens. Information collapse isn't just about wrong facts. It's about incentives that reward performance over meaning. Institutions started speaking to avoid blame rather than to transfer understanding. That's how you get green slides next to red streets. That's how you teach a generation to treat official statements like weather forecasts. Maybe true, maybe not, always background noise. In the end, belief is a habit. You build it by being audible, accountable, and human long before the sirens. We broke the habit. We replaced it with content. And when content becomes the product, truth becomes a rounding error. The next crisis won't wait for us to fix that. It will test whether anyone with standing can tell a hard story and be trusted anyway. The history, promises, betrayals, and drift. To understand how the room lost its adults, we need to go back to when competence carried status. After the war, a strange consensus took root in many places. You make the pipes work, you get respect. Engineers were local celebrities. Public health officers could shut down a fairground and still get invited to the barbecue. Newsrooms paid for months of digging because both readers and owners believed that finding truth was a civic good, not a cost center. Government, for all its flaws, recruited talent with a simple pitch: come serve, we'll back your judgment. Merit was imperfect, often exclusionary, but the core promise held: mastery earns autonomy. In that world, apprenticeship mattered. You didn't just get a title, you earned a seat by carrying a pager, being wrong in public, and learning why. The status economy rewarded the person who knew where the weak seam lived and had the standing to say no. Trust was sticky because it was personal. People knew who to call, and those names didn't change every election. Then came reforms that sounded right. Sunshine laws, performance management, transparency dashboards, audits that forced agencies to show their work. At first, these tools improved things. Corruption got harder, decisions gained daylight, but slowly a switch flipped. The theater replaced the purpose. Meetings shifted from solving problems to performing that problems were solved. The camera learned to love the ribbon more than the bridge. Management science arrived with charts that promised to tame messiness. Financialization said any mission could be measured and optimized. Outsourcing became wisdom. Internal capacity looked like waste. Leaders learned to talk about core competencies as if judgment under pressure were a commodity you could rent. In boardrooms and council chambers, someone always asked, "Can't a vendor do it cheaper?" The answer in the quarter was yes. The bill in the decade said otherwise. Scale and centralization moved decisions away from where reality lives. Regional desks merged into national hubs. Labs consolidated. Control rooms got bigger and farther from the lines they managed. You gained efficiency and lost texture. The fewer choke points, the bigger the failure when one slipped. The grand narrative said bigger was safer. The spreadsheet agreed. The field didn't. Media followed the money. Classifieds died. Ownership consolidated. The wall between business and editorial thinned. The promise to readers that will spend what it takes to tell you what's true blurred into a promise to platforms that will spend what it takes to be seen. Investigations still happened, but the muscle atrophied. The apprenticeship pipeline that taught a reporter how to lose a week on a dead end so they could find the one lead that mattered thinned to a thread. In science, prestige migrated from discovery to metrics. The H-index became a totem. Grants favored safe novelty, new enough to be fundable, old enough to be publishable. Reproducibility, the unglamorous backbone, struggled for oxygen. Journals multiplied, incentives fragmented. The promise to society that will chase what's real even when it's slow got downgraded to a slide about impact measured by citations and tweets. Civil service promises shrank under management trends. Tenure-like protections eroded. Lateral moves replaced career ladders. Rotations increased turnover. The signal, "this is a calling," fell under the noise, "this is a job." Politicization crept through appointments and comms vetoes. The old deal, "speak truth upward and we'll shield you," wasn't written down. When it broke, people felt the betrayal in their bones. Culture shifted too. Prestige decoupled from apprenticeship. Certifications and credentials stood in for years at the elbow of someone who'd done the work. Leadership became a portable brand. The hands-on craft of systems, bridges, grids, disease surveillance, looked like retrograde toil next to product launches and visionary decks. Young talent took the hint and chased worlds that still honored mastery with authority. And then came the last global shock. The breaking point wasn't the disease alone. It was the collision between old promises and new realities. Systems built on trust were asked to perform for cameras. Experts were asked to deliver certainty on timelines set by politics, not by evidence. When they couldn't, the blame shifted onto them, not onto the incentives that made honest answers risky. People kept receipts. Meanwhile, some places kept their basics. They invested after prior scares. They practiced public communication in peacetime. They preserved lanes where experts spoke without running their sentences through a political rinse cycle. They weren't perfect. They were ready enough. Others learned the wrong lesson. We managed, therefore our structure works. They locked in performance theater and congratulated themselves. The drift had a soundtrack. Efficiency, alignment, scale. Each word hit a trade. Efficiency trimmed redundancy that was actually resilience. Alignment muted dissent that was actually feedback. Scale erased local knowledge that was actually signal. Bit by bit, the people who'd been promised autonomy for competence found they were performing competence without autonomy. Betrayals weren't big speeches, they were quiet memos. A lab flagged a concern and got told to route it through comms. An editor killed a story for thin sourcing and got a note about brand voice. A regulator held a line and was labeled non-collaborative. Each moment said the same thing: we value smoothness over truth. People heard it. They adjusted. If you want to see how the fuse got lit, watch those adjustments compound. A few veterans leave. Apprenticeship thins, performance metrics harden, decisions centralize, errors rise, trust falls, comms tight. More veterans leave, a loop closes. By the time the sirens wail, you're staring at a uniform with no muscle underneath and wondering where the grown-ups went. They didn't vanish. They were priced out, pushed out, or worn out by a history that forgot why it hired them in the first place. The breaking point: burnout and moral injury. Here's where the numbers turn into people. Burnout wasn't just tired. It was a line crossed between what they believed and what they were asked to say. Moral injury lives there when your duty and your orders don't match, and you keep showing up anyway. A county health lead sat in a windowless room under fluorescent buzz, drafting guidance she didn't trust. Hospital intake notes said one thing, the talking points said another. She argued for the caveats, got told to project Competence, and watched the edits sand off everything that mattered. She signed it. Then the calls started: angry parents, threats that named her kid's school. She walked to her car with a security escort and thought, I'm not this person. 2 months later, she was gone. Whiplash did damage you can't see on a spreadsheet. 1 week, don't mask. Next week, mask always. The evidence shifted, that's normal. The politics shifted faster, that's poison. Experts ate the blowback for corrections they begged to explain and weren't allowed to. Every apology felt like a personal failure, even when it was. The body keeps that score. Frontline nurses changed routines that were never routines. New donning sequences, new staffing ratios, new codes for phones that never stopped. Then the shift ended, and someone had posted their home address with a promise to visit. Administrators sent, "We will not tolerate harassment," emails that felt like umbrella ads in a hailstorm. People started parking 3 blocks away and carrying their shoes to stay quiet on the stairs. Regulators swallowed a different kind of bile. A plant with a known history got political cover for a fast track. An engineer raised a flag and watched a cross-functional working group dissolve it into process. He followed the process, documented concerns, and went home sick. The meeting notes said issues addressed. They weren't. He stopped sleeping through the night. His kid asked why he worked on weekends if work made him angry. He didn't have a good answer. Journalists learned the cost of being right too early. One editor held a story to verify a source and watched a competitor run the rumor and win the day. She got blamed for missing the moment, then blamed again when a slower, accurate version landed with half the attention. The daring ones took the arrows. The careful ones took the lectures. Both took the threats. A newsroom turned into a fortress with keycards and bag checks and a Slack channel for court filings. The masthead said everything was fine. The hallways said otherwise. Micro story: a county health officer stepped to a mic to say a school would close for a week. She knew the politics, she made the call anyway. A man in the 3rd row shouted her maiden name. She felt the floor tilt. Afterward, the sheriff offered a patrol car outside her house. Her daughter asked if she could still ride her bike. She thought about the next presser. She drafted her resignation that night and saved it in drafts. 2 weeks later, she hit send. Vacancy chains followed. 1 leader leaves, 3 people act. Acting doesn't carry the standing to say no under pressure. Acting learns to wait for the principal. The timelines stretch. The workload doesn't. The people who remain pick up pieces and start counting backward from their own exit dates. Meanwhile, internal trust cracked. A lab tech flagged an anomaly, watched it die in legal review, and stopped bringing anomalies. An ops lead took heat for halting a procedure, then watched a smoother counterpart get an award for keeping us on schedule. The lesson wasn't subtle. Speak up, bleed. Stand down, advance. That's a payroll plan for moral injury. Pay didn't help. A hospital could double a travel nurse's rate in a week and still argue that a veteran's overtime wasn't budgeted. A state agency paid a contractor 2 salaries to document a process the staff already knew while freezing hiring for the seat that could use it. Loyalty became a liability. Calling became a punchline. Pride became a memory stored in a box under a desk next to a faded badge. Some tried to fix it from inside. They pushed for debriefs that named decisions and trade-offs. They asked to bring field voices to the mic. They proposed threat protocols that didn't put the target on the target's back. They got partial wins and quiet retaliation. A desk move here, a worse shift there. The signal traveled, don't rock. What it felt like day to day was smaller. Narrower lanes, narrower words. a copy and paste feeling even as the stakes got bigger. The veterans who stayed learned to tuck their judgment into side channels, texts, calls, favors owed, because the official paths punished it. That works until the network frays. Then something breaks. A public message gets flattened into spin. A safety call gets delayed for optics. A junior is told to take the heat for a decision made above her pay grade. She puts the statement on the record and it slides into the feed like chum. She goes home and stares at a ceiling fan and counts the rotations. Here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. Burnout is treatable. Moral injury isn't, not by pizza and a 3-day weekend. You fix it by aligning authority with responsibility and telling the truth before, during, after. You fix it by covering the person who takes the hard right. We didn't. We sent thank you notes and tightened comms. After enough of that, the room empties. The badge still opens the door. The badge sits in a drawer. The emergency line rings and a team answers, thinner, jumpier, earnest, under-mentored. Their hearts are in it. Their authority is. The clock moves anyway. Scenario walkthrough. The next 30 days of a real crisis. Day 1, a Friday, starts with a smell. A wastewater tech in a river city catches a spike in a sub-basin near the bus depot, viral fragments above seasonal noise. He emails the county epidemiology inbox. It's unstaffed after 5 p.m. The message waits. Day 2, Saturday, ER triage logs show 4 young adults with similar fevers and shortness of breath. A junior analyst on weekend duty checks the dashboard. Case counts look stable because labs batch results on Mondays. She notes monitor and closes her laptop at 9 p.m. Day 3, Sunday, the substation that feeds the lab district trips for 7 minutes during a heat wave. Freezers flicker, auto dialers fail, and one lab loses half a day of assays. They'll rerun on Tuesday. The wastewater alert still sits in an inbox. Day 4, Monday morning, a mayor announces a jobs initiative. The health department's comms team is assigned to amplify it. The surveillance lead is acting and juggling 2 roles. She skims weekend notes and schedules a huddle for afternoon. By lunch, 6 more ER cases arrive. A popular account posts a thread about mystery pneumonia. The huddle gets bumped. Day 5, Tuesday, lab confirmations lag. ICD codes are messy. A county hospitalist calls the acting lead and says, "This is moving." She tries to convene a cross-county call. Legal insists on approved talking points. The draft says, "No cause for concern." She deletes the line, adds, "We're watching closely," and gets told to hold. Day 6, Wednesday, a commuter bus driver collapses mid-route and tests positive for a yet unnamed respiratory pathogen. A video of the evacuation goes viral. The transit authority asks for guidance on driver masking. The state says wait for CDC language. Drivers start calling in sick. Day 7, Thursday, the wastewater lab drops the backlogged run. A steep rise across 3 basins. The acting lead pushes for a public note. The county executive's office wants to align with the governor. A joint statement meeting is set for tomorrow. An influencer claims they sat on this for a week. He's accidentally right. Days 8 to 10, Friday through Sunday, the messaging vacuum opens. Parents demand clarity. Schools ask for thresholds. A template from the last crisis is pulled and lightly edited. It references metrics this pathogen doesn't match. A press conference promises data-driven decisions and says, "No changes to daily life at this time." ERs are boarding patients. Nurses start texting reporters. Day 11, Monday, a modeling deck lands at the Emergency Operations Center. It was built for influenza. A consultant updates parameters on the fly. The curves look smooth, they always do. The deck recommends targeted mitigations and assumes stable staffing. Staffing isn't stable. The acting lead asks to include wastewater as an early signal. The deck's author says it's directionally interesting but not official. Day 12, Tuesday, a factory cluster shutters a food distributor. Grocery shelves clear unevenly. A local radio host connects the outbreak to water quality and tells listeners to avoid tap water. The utility scrambles a statement. The rumor outruns it. Day 13, Wednesday, the grid operator calls for a voluntary conservation day as temps spike. Hospitals can't comply, they're full and humming. A peaker plant fails to start. Rolling blackouts are considered and shelved. Optics. The operator writes an email titled, "If frequency sags, shed early." The approval chain holds it. Day 14, Thursday, the mayor and governor do dueling pressers. One says, "Mask in crowded indoor spaces." The other says, "No mandates." People split by identity, not risk. Compliance fragments. The acting lead stares at her phone as threats stack up in messages she didn't ask to read. Days 15 to 17, Friday to Sunday, the model's optimistic lane collapses. Admissions double. The consultant updates the deck. The new curve looks worse but still tidy. The county executive orders school flexibility. Districts improvise half-days, staggered starts. Parents swap roomers. A community group organizes pop-up testing with volunteers. They run out of swabs. The state's shipment is delayed because a hub airport canceled flights in the heat. Day 18, Monday, the incident command tests a targeted isolation policy that assumes fast results in universal sick leave. Results are slow. Sick leave isn't universal. Compliance drops. A union rep says, "Our drivers can't afford your plan." He's right. The plan is revised by email. The revision doesn't reach night shift. Day 19, Tuesday, hospital oxygen use spikes. A vendor misses a refill window because the one operator who knows the back route over the ridge retired last fall. The truck turns around at a closure. An ICU nurse calls the vendor directly. He sends a smaller truck with a driver who learned the route hunting on weekends. They make it. Nobody outside hears. Day 20, Wednesday, the state requests federal support. The request form is perfect. The need is blunt, and the clock is slow. A neighboring state with a cleaner dashboard gets attention first. The acting lead wonders if she should have colored more squares green. Days 21 to 24, Thursday to Sunday, improvisation becomes policy. A junior analyst builds a wastewater to admissions leading indicator overnight. It works. It's unofficial. A school nurse network starts a text tree and spots a hot zone before the county does. The county asks them to stop to avoid confusion. They don't. They save a week. Day 25, Monday, the grid sags again. The operator sheds load late to avoid headlines. The blackout is larger than it had to be. A hospital's backup generator misfires. The one mechanic who knows the quirk moved to a contractor. He answers a personal call and walks a resident through the fix over FaceTime. It holds. Day 26, Tuesday, the governor announces a data alignment task force. The acting lead stares at the ceiling. She drafts a resignation letter. She doesn't send it. A veteran county comms officer breaks ranks and holds a Q and A on local radio, speaking plainly. Compliance ticks up where people know her voice. Day 27, Wednesday, the model is retired quietly. A field-driven protocol takes its place. Wastewater trend plus admissions velocity triggers a simple package: masks in clinics, surge staffing, targeted outreach. It's late. It helps. Day 28, Thursday, cases plateau. The system exhales. A council member tweets that the crisis was overblown. A reporter asks for emails about the early warning. The county stalls. The acting lead prints her resignation and folds it into her bag. Day 29, Friday, a debrief invite goes out with no agenda. The invite list excludes the school nurses and the grid operator who saved the generators. A consultant prepares slides titled "Lessons Learned." Day 30, Saturday, the wastewater lab sees a secondary rise in a different basin. The tech emails the inbox. It's the weekend. The message waits. The counterfactual, places that kept their experts. While our inbox sat unstaffed on weekends, some places answered on ring 1. Not perfectly. Enough. Start with Singapore. After SARS, they didn't just file lessons, they built muscle. A central command spine with named roles, financial reserves that bought time, and a practice of letting experts talk before the lawyers sanded the edges. They drilled surveillance, contact tracing, and surge capacity like a sport. Reps in peacetime, not just speeches in emergencies. Tenure in key safety posts meant you could say, pause, without checking the wind direction in politics. People believed the mic because the same voices showed up, week after week, with receipts. You could see it in the cadence. When risk shifted, guidance shifted, and the explanation arrived the same day, why, what changed, what we're watching next. They centralized decision-making but didn't flatten judgment. A hospital infection control lead could call an audible on a ward and report up without fear. The communications lines recognized nuance without turning into fog. Trust wasn't demanded, it was accumulated. Taiwan built a different version of the same idea. Institutional memory made into infrastructure. The 2003 scar tissue turned into checklists, stockpiles, cross-agency playbooks, and a data backbone that mattered. The National Health Insurance Database integrated with border, lab, and clinic feeds. Early detection wasn't a hope. It was stitched into workflows. Disease detectives had lanes to act and didn't wait for a green slide to acknowledge reality. And when they didn't know something, they said so, then came back when they did. That rhythm builds compliance. Look closer at how they kept people. They protected expert voices from whiplash by design. Clear authorities, depoliticized briefings, and legal shields that made harassment a crime with teeth. Compensation didn't match Silicon Valley, but the gap was narrowed by purpose, stability, and respect that was visible, not theoretical. Apprenticeship lived in clinics and control rooms, rotations that lasted long enough to hear the off in a pump, to smell when a mix drifted, to see a pattern before the model did. Veterans taught, juniors listened, and the latter pointed up, not out. They also kept the system honest about trade-offs. Metrics existed, but they answered to outcomes. A dashboard was a tool, not a trophy. When Goodhart's shadow crept in when counting threatened to replace knowing, someone with standing said, "Stop." You felt it during briefings, fewer theater words, more verbs about doing. Corrections were framed as learning, not loss of face. That's how you keep truth from turning into a vibe. There's a grid version of this, too. Some operators treat blue sky days as a gift to practice black sky moves. Cross-border agreements rehearsed, not assumed. Staffing plans funded the unsexy redundancy that CFOs love to call waste. 2 operators on nights who can think in contingencies without a supervisor's permission. Apprentices got months on the board with a veteran's shadow before they touched a switch solo. And when heat domes hit, load shed decisions happened early, with clear explanations through voices people recognized. Outages were smaller, shorter, less political. In aviation, a few carriers refused to hollow out maintenance. They preserved line authority for crew chiefs to pull tail numbers without harassment. They tracked anomalies across fleets and rewarded the tech who saw the pattern, not the manager who buried it. When a schedule slipped, executives ate the optics because safety had standing. Those companies took short-term pain and gained long memory. You can measure it in near misses that stayed near. Media has counterfactuals, too. Outlets that kept copy desks, funded FOIA fights, and protected editors who killed shaky stories retained readers who trust corrections. They built local presence, bylines at school board meetings, not just on cable hits. They paid enough to keep institutional memory from walking. When a crisis landed, their feeds didn't cup their ear toward rage. They pointed it toward context. Subscribers reward that with patience. And in civil service, pockets of competence survived by insulating safety roles from political churn. Protected tenure paired with performance review by peers who knew the craft. Inspectors spent more days in steel toes than in slide reviews, and their supervisors shielded them when a shutdown order irritated a donor. Apprenticeship was formal. Named mentors, logged site hours, sign-offs that meant something. When an acting title appeared, it came with authority, not a waiting room. What ties these cases isn't magic culture. It's choices that look expensive until you price failure. They narrowed spans of control so decisions stayed close to reality. They codified judgment into training without pretending training could replace judgment. They treated communication as a public safety tool, not a branding exercise. They aligned incentives with the real job. Fewer surprises, faster recovery, quieter outcomes. Micro story: a Type A disease detective notices a cluster that feels wrong. She flags it at 9 a.m., a cross-agency call convenes by noon, and by 5 p.m. a spokesperson explains what they know, what they don't, and what to watch. Compliance holds because the cadence is familiar. Another: a Singapore comms lead walks out to cameras and answers tough questions without ducking. Next day's guidance refines, not reverses. The public adjusts without whiplash. None of this erases mistakes. It absorbs them. Systems with experts in the room bend without snapping. They don't pretend uncertainty is weakness. They turn it into a plan. And because they protect the people who carry tacit knowledge, those people stay, teach, and raise the floor. That's the counterfactual, not flawless, just ready enough because they kept the one thing that can't be procured in a crisis: experience with authority to use it. Rebuilding competence: practical, painful, possible. If you want the room to have adults again, you don't start with slogans. You start by moving authority back to where reality lives, and you write it down so it can't be quietly reversed the next time a headline snarls. Depoliticize safety roles first. That means fixed terms and removal thresholds for chiefs of public health, grid operations, aviation safety, and critical infrastructure inspections, tied to peer review panels, not political offices. Give them independent comms lanes with legal standing to speak to the public when risk rises, without clearing every verb through a political aid. You'll take some awkward pressers. You'll buy trust you can't fake. Next, rebuild apprenticeship like it's a safety system, because it is. Name mentors, log hours, Tie sign-offs to specific proficiencies you can't learn from a module. Recognize instrument drift by ear. Diagnose sampling error by smell. Run an islanded grid without waiting for permission. Capture institutional memory in a way living humans can use. Oral debriefs recorded, indexed by scenario, paired with short, gritty write-ups. What we missed, what saved us, what we'll do next time. Don't bury them in portals nobody opens. Put them into drills. Fix the metrics or they'll fix you. Replace throughput KPIs with outcome metrics you can't game easily. Near-miss capture rate, time from weak signal to validated alert, percentage of audits that generate corrective action that actually gets funded. Weight descent properly, create a hold authority metric. How often did someone with standing pause operations and how often did review vindicate them? Reward the pauses that averted pain. The green dashboard isn't the goal, fewer surprises is. Funding has to follow function, not optics. Carve protected headcount for safety-critical roles, with budgets that don't evaporate at the end of a fiscal year. Stop treating contractors as muscle memory on retainer. Use them for surge, not core. If you outsource, pair every vendor slot with an internal shadow whose job is to absorb the knowledge and keep it. Contracts should include a teach-back clause, no renewal until you've trained your replacement enough to be dangerous. Pay parity won't match tech salaries, but it doesn't have to. Close the insult gap. Make benefits visible and immediate. Hazard pay tied to threat levels. Legal defense funds and threat mitigation services for public-facing experts as a default, not an apology. Enforce doxing and harassment protections with real prosecutions. Tell the next county health lead's family before the first threat arrives exactly what you'll do when it does. Then do it once publicly. Shrink spans of control so judgment has room to breathe. A supervisor with 30 direct reports manages optics. A supervisor with 7 knows who's hearing the wrong hum. Local authority beats centralized delay in fast variables. Push authorizations down. Let clinic leads trigger micro-interventions on wastewater spikes. Let substation techs shed load within a tight band without waiting for a green light 5 counties away. Let inspectors red tag with minimal paperwork, then justify later. Abuse happens. Oversight is peer, not political. Comms needs surgery, not spin. Appoint a standing safety PIO who reports to the safety chief, not the mayor. Train 3 backups. Script the habit of uncertainty. What we know, what we don't, what would change our mind. Build a stable of community translators before sirens, school nurses, pastors, union stewards, neighborhood captains, and pay them to sit in peacetime briefings. Their voices will cut through when yours sounds like government. Drill reality, not tabletop theater, messy cross-system exercises with failure baked in. Pull the plug on a plant for an hour and make the comms, hospital, and logistics teams work the problem with radios that drop calls. Run a dirty data day in surveillance. Lag the labs, scramble ICD codes, and score teams on how quickly they triangulate with phones, wastewater, and school nurses. Publish the after-action reports with names protected and lessons blunt. Reform science incentives where you can reach. For public money, fund replication and negative results as first-class outcomes. Require open methods and post-publication review windows in grant deliverables. Tie trainee support to mentorship quality scores collected anonymously and audited. Measure labs on reliability and reuse, not just novelty. Make preprint comms guardrails a condition of funding. If you go public early, you carry the uncertainty like a badge. Media won't fix itself on your timeline, but you can choose partners. Prioritize outlets with copy desks and correction muscle. Offer access in exchange for process literacy. Let reporters sit in drills and debrief so the first time they hear uncertainty isn't live at a podium. When they burn you for clicks, freeze them out for a cycle. When they handle a correction with care, bring them closer. Incentives work both ways. Recruit like you mean it. Hire for stubbornness under pressure. Value prior craft over adjacent prestige. A machinist who's kept a finicky line running brings more to a water plant than a consultant with perfect slides. Build return ramps for the good ones who left. Amnesty for titles, not standards. Offer expert in residence terms. A year to teach, codify, rebuild, then decide together. Finally, name a person for the pause. Every system needs a clearly identified human with authority to stop the show, grid, bridge, lab comms, publish their name internally, protect their back externally, track how often they pressed the button and what it cost or saved. Tell those stories at staff meetings until they're boring. This is slow work. It will look inefficient. It will feel expensive. It buys the one thing our thin systems can't fake: time. Time to notice, to argue, to teach, to say no before yes. Painful? Yes. Possible? Absolutely, if we choose competence over convenience when it's quiet, not when it's loud. The power struggle, who benefits from hollow institutions? While we talk about rebuilding, there's a reason it keeps slipping. Hollow institutions aren't accidents, they're assets for the right players. Start with politics. When decisions centralize and expertise thins, power gets easier to steer. A principal can override a safety call without arguing the merits, only the optics. Fewer grown-ups in the room means fewer breaks. Short-term wins look clean. Ribbon cut, headline secured, oversight delayed. If something breaks, blame the process, shuffle titles, announce a task force. The cycle rewards the person who can point the camera, not the one who can read the gauge. Then there's the consulting flywheel. Every capacity you trim becomes a contract someone can sell back to you at twice the price and half the accountability. They arrive with templates, win credibility by repeating your pain points back to you, and turn ambiguity into deliverables. Renewal depends on your dependency. If you fix the root cause, the contract dies. If the dashboard glows and the core stays weak, the invoice lives. Hollow is recurring revenue. Platforms profit from fracture. Outrage is a durable business model, trust is not. A world where institutions can calmly say, here, what we know is slow content. A world where every update looks like a duel is profitable. Weak comms, muzzled experts, warring agencies, each misstep feeds engagement. The algorithm rewards certainty and tribe, nuance drowns. You can't sell, we're still checking, next to a trending thread about plot and betrayal. So the platforms keep paying attention to the loudest voices, which keeps everyone else shouting. Careerism thrives in hollow spaces. Compliance becomes a ladder, dissent becomes a trapdoor. If the system values alignment over accuracy, smart climbers learn to perform alignment. They choose metrics that flatter, schedules that hide risk, committees that diffuse blame. They don't pick fights with assumptions that keep the machine running. They're not villains. They're reading the room. In that room, the person who says, "Stop, this is wrong," looks like a problem to manage. The person who says, "We'll fix it in the deck," looks like a future leader. Vendors who replace public capacity learn your blind spots and sell into them. They study procurement, not the pump's hum. They build features that screenshot well and promise decision support that can be demonstrated in a demo. The quiet craft that prevents emergencies doesn't demo, so it loses budget. You buy the ritual, not the resilience. The vendor keeps you on version updates and new modules while your apprenticeship pipeline dries to a trickle. Lobbyists prefer hollow over hard. Strong institutions with strong experts set rules that bite. Hollow ones chase stakeholder input until the bite becomes a nibble. If enforcement is performance theater, compliance becomes a cost of doing business, not a constraint. A regulator with discretion can surprise you. A regulator with KPIs can be gamed. Guess which one gets funded by the industry that wants predictability. There's another beneficiary, central command itself. In a hollowed system, comms is king. When the narrative is the product, the people who control the press release control reality for a while. That's intoxicating. It's also fragile. They learn to treat expertise as a leak risk rather than a reservoir. They build filters that catch the friction that might have saved them. Each funnel you add buys a cleaner story and sells a messier future. Watch how this plays out in a budget meeting. A safety chief asks for 3 more inspectors with deep experience. The finance lead asks for proof of ROI. The chief brings near misses. The finance lead brings comparables from peer cities who outsourced and saved. The consultant already at the table offers a pilot to optimize field coverage with tablets and dynamic routing. It looks responsible. It erodes judgment. The chief loses. The city buys glow. Meanwhile, the people at the edge, nurses, inspectors, operators, become props in success stories or scapegoats when the story fails. Their voices don't fit the slide's shape. They warn, pause, complicate. In hollow systems, those verbs are punished. You don't keep them if you keep punishing them. Here's the ugly choice the power centers won't articulate: discomfort now or catastrophe later. Discomfort is letting experts speak when the answer is we aren't sure yet. Discomfort is funding redundancy and explaining why you paid for capacity that sat quiet for 2 years. Discomfort is watching a schedule slip because an old hand insisted on a second look. Catastrophe is cheaper to narrate but more expensive to live. Who loses under hollow? Everyone who needs the system to work when the stress hits. The night shift resident who expects oxygen. The family crossing a bridge that should just be a bridge. The school that needs a straight answer. The reporter who wants the documents without a 6-month stall. The grid operator who knows shedding early saves pain and needs permission to act. This is a power struggle because the reforms that rebuild competence claw back control from the people who steward narratives and budgets. Independent comms lanes move the mic. Fixed terms for safety posts reduce leverage. Teach backs and shadows reduce vendor lock-in. Dissent metrics embarrass managers who rose on smooth dashboards. Peer review of performance upsets political chains that prefer loyalty over craft. Each fix creates friction for someone who's winning now. Back to the promise we made at the start. One decision lit the fuse, one can pull it. The pull is simple to say and hard to live. Give authority back to the people who will be blamed if they're wrong and shield them when they're right. Everything else is costume. The meaning, what we lose if we do nothing. If we let the drain keep running, the first loss isn't spectacular. It's the quiet glue. Shared reality thins until rules feel optional and guidance feels like posture. We drift into tribes where evidence is just a jersey color. The cost shows up in small humiliations. Boyle notices nobody follows, outages that drag an extra hour, advisories written for optics instead of action. You start budgeting for failure like weather. Safety systems become rituals. We keep the checklists, the dashboards, the briefings, but they're costumes. People play their parts, file their reports, hit their KPIs. The rituals don't move risk because the authority to move it left the building. You can feel the hollowness in how meetings end. More alignment, less decision. Innovation slows in ways accountants miss. Apprenticeship dies and ideas get shallower. The hard-to-teach instincts, the off note in a motor, the smell of a bad sample, the feel of a lying dataset, don't transmit by video. So we build tools for users who don't know what excellence looks like, and we call it progress. The curve flattens, not because we ran out of curiosity, but because we ran out of mentors. Young talent watches the room. They learn 3 rules: don't question metrics, don't own uncertainty, don't expect cover. The brave ones leave, the careful ones sand themselves down. The pipeline fills with people optimized for smoothness. Systems built on judgment start acting like vending machines. They vend until a stressor jams the chute. Trust doesn't just fall, it calcifies into cynicism. People stop distinguishing between mistakes and lies. Every correction reads as confession. Every pause looks like weakness. In that atmosphere, even good decisions bleed. Leaders hide, experts whisper, loud voices set the map. You get governance by virality. The culture changes your spine. We internalize delay as virtue, blandness as safety, and secrecy as prudence. It's a bad trade. You lose the wattage that sparks when a veteran says, stop, and everyone stops because they trust the voice. You lose the pride that keeps a crew chief awake thinking about a tail number. You lose the neighbor who can explain the plan in a sentence your kid believes. Here's the last cut. Complexity becomes a stage for performance, not competence. We'll keep the props, the acronyms, the centers, the task forces. But when the sirens hit, we'll reach for a person who knows the edge cases and find a template instead. What we lose is the margin between near miss and obituary. That margin used to have a nameplate. It leaves one resignation at a time. The one thing that still works. Competence is culture, habits that give authority to the people who carry risk and let them speak before it hurts. If you want more of it, protect experts, reward truth over theater, and fund the slow work when it's quiet. If you're still here, subscribe. Then watch the follow-up on fragile supply systems, how thin warehouses and tired drivers turn small snags into national headaches. We'll meet the people holding it together.